It was a crisp autumn morning when Harold Jenkins, a 92-year-old World War II veteran, made his way to the Veterans Museum. The sky was a soft shade of blue, and the golden sunlight reflected off the museum's tall glass windows. Harold had been looking forward to this day for weeks. He had heard about the special ceremony being held to honor veterans, and though he was frail and walked slowly with the aid of a cane, he insisted on attending. After all, he had given his youth to serve his country, and he believed this small gesture of recognition mattered deeply. Dressed carefully in his old uniform, which had been meticulously preserved over the years, Harold adjusted his medals on his chest. Each one had a story, each one a memory of sacrifice, courage, and camaraderie. He took a deep breath as he approached the museum entrance, expecting a warm welcome or, at the very least, polite acknowledgement. He had been to ceremonies like this before, and he remembered the smiles, the handshakes, and the heartfelt thanks from strangers. But today, something felt different. As Harold reached the front doors, a young security guard stepped forward. The guard, in his crisp black uniform, looked at Harold with a mixture of uncertainty and discomfort. "Sir, I'm sorry," he said, "but this event is by invitation only." Harold's eyebrows furrowed. "By invitation only?" he repeated, his voice calm but firm. "I am a veteran. I fought in the war. I was here for events like this before." He fumbled with his wallet and pulled out his veteran ID, showing it to the guard. The plastic card, worn with age, carried Harold's name, rank, and years of service. The guard glanced at it, then back at Harold. "I understand, sir," he said, "but the ceremony is restricted. I can't let anyone in without a current invitation." Harold's heart sank. He had walked several blocks to be here, leaning on his cane for support, and now he was being stopped at the door. He looked around and saw other visitors entering the museum freely, some holding programs, others chatting excitedly. Children ran ahead with their parents, and groups of veterans gathered near the main hall. Harold stood quietly, trying not to draw attention, but the sting of being denied entry was clear on his face. "I served my country," he said softly but with a hint of frustration. "I fought for the freedom to come to places like this. Surely a veteran is welcome here." The guard hesitated, looking uncomfortable. I'm just doing my job, sir," he said. "I don't make the rules." Harold nodded slowly. He could see the conflict in the young man's eyes, but it did not ease his disappointment. He tried one more approach. "Is there someone I can speak to? A manager, perhaps? Someone who can understand why a veteran should not be turned away?" The guard nodded reluctantly and radioed inside the museum. After a few tense minutes, a museum staff member appeared. She was in her 50s with a kind face, and she looked at Harold with an apologetic expression. "Sir, I'm very sorry," she said. "We have a large crowd, and the invitations are limited. We cannot allow entry without them." Harold took a deep breath, feeling a mix of sadness and disbelief. "I don't need special treatment," he said. "I just want to attend the ceremony. I just want to honor my friends who served and see the recognition of veterans." The staff member hesitated. She looked at him and then at the crowd, unsure of how to handle the situation. "I understand, sir," she said quietly. "But the rules are strict today. I don't want to get in trouble." Harold's hands shook slightly, not from age but from the frustration of being denied something that seemed so simple. He looked around, noticing the visitors whispering to each other. Some shook their heads in disbelief. A few approached him and offered kind words. "It's not right," one woman said softly. "You should be in there." Harold felt a warm surge of gratitude toward those strangers, but it did little to ease the immediate sting. He thought about the long years he had lived, the battles he had faced, and the sacrifices he had made. And yet here he was, a decorated veteran, being turned away at the door. He could feel the weight of disappointment pressing on his shoulders. As Harold prepared to step back from the entrance, resigning himself to leave, something unusual happened. The sound of several black SUVs approaching broke the morning's quiet. The engines rumbled softly at first, then louder as the vehicles came to a stop outside the museum. Harold glanced toward the street, curiosity mingling with hope. Who could be arriving at this hour? A small crowd began to gather near the doors, drawn by the sudden arrival of the sleek vehicles. People whispered among themselves, trying to guess the reason for the unexpected visitors. Harold's heart raced slightly. He had no idea, but he sensed that something important was about to happen. The museum staff, noticing the sudden attention, also looked toward the street. Their expressions shifted from routine concern to anxious anticipation. The security guard who had denied Harold entry looked puzzled, as if sensing that the situation was about to change in a way he could not control. Harold, leaning on his cane, felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this would be the moment that would finally bring recognition, not just for him, but for all the veterans who had waited patiently for their chance to be honored. He straightened his back slightly, adjusting his uniform, and looked toward the approaching vehicles, his eyes full of quiet determination and expectation. Little did Harold know that the arrival of these vehicles would change everything. The day that had begun with disappointment and frustration was about to take an extraordinary turn, and in the moments that followed, the rules, the invitations, and the strict protocols of the museum would be challenged in a way no one could have anticipated. Harold stood patiently, unaware that history was about to witness a powerful moment of respect, dignity, and honor for a man who had already given so much to his country. The morning sun continued to shine, casting a golden glow on the museum, on Harold, and on the crowd that had begun to notice the unusual scene unfolding. The moment of recognition, long overdue, was just a few steps away, and Harold, the elderly veteran who had been denied entry, would soon find himself at the center of an unforgettable event that no one at the museum would ever forget. The black SUVs came to a smooth stop just outside the museum entrance, their polished surfaces glinting in the morning sun. A small crowd had gathered, curious about the sudden arrival. Phones were raised as people whispered and pointed, wondering who had come. Harold Jenkins, still standing near the doors, leaned slightly on his cane, squinting at the approaching figures. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, as if something important was about to happen. From the first SUV stepped a man in a crisp military uniform. He walked with authority, his posture straight and every movement precise. He was older, perhaps in his 60s, with white hair neatly combed and a face that spoke of experience and discipline. His uniform was adorned with rows of medals and ribbons, evidence of a long and distinguished career. This was General Robert Matthews, a 4-star general, one of the most respected figures in the country. As the general approached the museum, he noticed the small crowd near the entrance. His sharp eyes quickly fell on Harold, the elderly veteran who looked hesitant and disappointed. The general paused for a moment, observing the situation. The security guard who had denied Harold entry stood nervously nearby, unsure of how to respond to the arrival of such a high-ranking officer. General Matthews walked toward the guard, his voice calm but firm. "What is happening here?" he asked. The guard straightened, feeling the weight of the general's presence. "Sir, this man cannot enter," he stammered. "The ceremony is by invitation only. I'm just doing my job." The general's eyes shifted to Harold, who still stood quietly, cane in hand, looking both hopeful and uncertain. Matthew's expression softened, but there was also a clear sense of authority in his voice. "This man is a veteran, is he not?" he asked. The guard nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. He served in World War II, but..." He hesitated, unsure how to explain the strict rules to someone of the general's rank. "Then he should be here," Matthews said simply. "No veteran should be turned away at the door of this museum." Harold felt his heart leap. He had not expected anyone, no matter how important, to notice him. But here was a 4-star general standing in front of him, demanding recognition and respect. A wave of relief and gratitude washed over Harold, and he straightened as best he could, trying to meet the general's gaze. The museum staff quickly gathered, whispering among themselves. They were clearly concerned about the disruption, but General Matthews' presence left no room for argument. The staff member who had spoken to Harold earlier looked both worried and apologetic. "Sir," she began, we were only following the rules." Matthews raised a hand to quiet her. "Rules are important, yes," he said. "But respect for those who served our country is more important. This man deserves to be part of this ceremony. With a decisive gesture, he turned to Harold and extended his hand. "Come with me, sir," he said. "Let's make sure you are honored as you should be." The crowd erupted in soft applause. Some people cheered, while others took out their phones to capture the moment. Harold hesitated for a brief second, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events, then accepted the general's hand. Together they walked toward the museum doors, the security guard stepping aside respectfully. Inside, the ceremony was already underway. Families, veterans, and visitors were seated, listening to speeches and watching presentations. When Harold and General Matthews entered, the room fell silent for a moment. All eyes turned to the elderly veteran being escorted by the four-star general. A murmur ran through the audience, whispers of surprise, admiration, and respect. Matthews guided Harold to a seat of honor near the front, making sure he was comfortable. "You have served your country with courage," the general said quietly to him. "It is an honor to have you here." Harold felt a lump in his throat. He had spent so many years without recognition, yet now, at this moment, the acknowledgement felt overwhelming. He nodded, unable to speak at first, and simply smiled. The crowd, sensing the emotion of the moment, began to clap gently. Some veterans in the audience stood, saluting Harold with respect and admiration. The museum staff quickly adjusted, realizing that the ceremony needed to be modified to include Harold properly. The event coordinator stepped forward and addressed the audience, apologizing for the confusion and explaining that all veterans, especially those who had given so much, deserved recognition. As the ceremony continued, General Matthews took the stage to speak. His voice was calm, but every word carried authority and sincerity. "Today we honor all veterans," he said, "and we recognize that sometimes rules can unintentionally exclude those who have given their lives, their youth, and their strength for our country. Let us remember that no protocol should ever overshadow respect for those who served." Harold listened, tears forming in his eyes. He looked around at the crowd, seeing the faces of fellow veterans, young children, and families. Everyone seemed more attentive, more aware of the sacrifices made by men and women like him. The general's words resonated deeply, reminding everyone that true honor comes from recognition, respect, and humanity. After the speech, the ceremony paused briefly so Harold could receive a special acknowledgement. Matthews escorted him to the center of the room. The applause grew louder, filling the museum with a warm, emotional energy. The staff, initially flustered, now smiled, seeing how important this moment was. Visitors took photos, clapped, and some even wiped tears from their eyes. Harold was presented with a commemorative medal, not for new accomplishments, but as a symbol of gratitude for a lifetime of service. Matthews shook his hand again and smiled. "This is yours," he said, "for everything you have done." The elderly veteran's hands trembled slightly as he held the medal. He looked around at the faces of strangers who were now friends, sharing in this moment of respect. For Harold, it was more than recognition. It was validation, an affirmation that decades of sacrifice had not been forgotten. As the ceremony resumed, Matthews remained nearby, ensuring that Harold was included in every part of the event. They listened to stories, watched presentations, and even shared a quiet conversation about the days when Harold had served in distant lands. The general's presence gave Harold confidence and dignity, showing the audience that true leaders recognize and honor those who came before them. By the end of the ceremony, Harold felt a mixture of relief, pride, and gratitude. What had begun as a day of disappointment had transformed into a day of joy, respect, and recognition. The crowd left the museum inspired, sharing stories about the veteran who had almost been turned away, and the general who had ensured that justice and honor prevailed. Outside, the black SUVs waited to take General Matthews away. He gave Harold a final nod and a respectful salute. Harold returned it, feeling a deep sense of connection and appreciation. He knew that this moment, this unexpected intervention, would stay with him for the rest of his life. The incident reminded everyone present that respect for veterans is more than ceremony or protocol. It is a reflection of society's values. And for Harold Jenkins, a man who had once been denied entry, this day became a memory of dignity restored, thanks to one person willing to act with courage and honor. The ceremony continued, but the atmosphere had changed completely. What had begun as an ordinary morning at the Veterans Museum had turned into something extraordinary. Harold Jenkins, the elderly veteran who had been denied entry just moments ago, now sat in a place of honor, surrounded by applause, smiles, and respect. He adjusted his cane and straightened his back as he watched the room, feeling a sense of pride and belonging that he had not felt in years. General Robert Matthews remained close, observing the crowd and ensuring that Harold was included in every part of the event. The general's presence carried weight, and the museum staff moved quickly to make sure everything ran smoothly. Visitors whispered among themselves, pointing at Harold, marveling at the scene and the respect being shown to one man who had given so much for his country. After a short pause, the event coordinator called everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "we are here not only to honor veterans but to recognize one in particular who embodies courage, dedication, and service. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Harold Jenkins." The crowd erupted in applause again. Some veterans stood, saluting, while children clapped enthusiastically. Harold felt a warmth in his chest as he looked at the faces around him. He had never imagined that one day the recognition would feel this powerful, this meaningful. General Matthews guided Harold to the front of the room. A small table held a commemorative medal, specially prepared for the occasion. The medal was engraved with words of gratitude for his service, representing decades of courage and sacrifice. Harold's hands trembled slightly as he reached for it, a mixture of awe and emotion making him pause. "This medal," the general said, "is not for something you did yesterday or last year. It is for a lifetime of service, for the battles you fought, the friends you lost, and the courage you displayed in the face of unimaginable challenges. You deserve this and so much more." Harold accepted the medal, tears brimming in his eyes. He looked at General Matthews and nodded, unable to find the right words. The applause continued, louder than before, as the audience recognized the significance of the moment. For Harold, it was not just the medal. It was acknowledgement of a life lived with honor, dedication, and sacrifice. After the presentation, the general invited Harold to say a few words. He stood slowly, gripping his cane tightly, and addressed the crowd. His voice was soft but steady, carrying the weight of decades of experience. "I never expected to be here this morning," Harold began. "I came hoping to honor my fellow veterans, to remember the friends I lost, and to witness the bravery of those who serve. I did not think I would be denied entry, and I certainly did not expect such kindness and respect from someone like General Matthews. But today I feel seen. I feel honored, and I want to thank everyone who has served, and everyone who remembers the sacrifices we made." The audience listened intently, some nodding, some wiping tears from their eyes. Harold's words were simple, yet they carried a profound message. They reminded everyone present of the sacrifices veterans make quietly, often without recognition, and how small acts of acknowledgement can have a life-changing impact. As the ceremony progressed, stories of other veterans were shared, highlighting courage, determination, and resilience. Harold listened quietly, occasionally nodding or offering a smile. He felt a sense of community, realizing that his experience, while unique, was part of a larger story of service and sacrifice. The general stayed close, occasionally whispering words of encouragement or pointing out details of the presentations that might interest Harold. When the event neared its end, the museum director approached Harold personally. "Sir, on behalf of everyone here, I want to apologize again for the confusion earlier," he said. "You should never have been denied entry. We hope that today shows how much we value you and all our veterans." Harold smiled warmly. "Thank you," he said. "It's not about apologies. It's about respect, and today, I've felt that respect more than I have in many years. That is enough." Outside, the sun had climbed higher, casting long shadows across the museum grounds. Visitors began to leave, but many lingered, talking about what they had witnessed. The story of Harold Jenkins, the veteran denied entry and then honored by a four-star general, spread quickly. People shared the experience on social media, capturing the powerful moment of respect and dignity. Harold slowly made his way to the entrance, still clutching his medal. General Matthews accompanied him, stopping briefly to shake hands with other veterans and visitors. "It was an honor to meet you," Matthews said quietly. "Thank you for your service." Harold nodded, a gentle smile on his face. "And thank you," he replied, "for remembering what matters most." Before leaving, the general turned to the museum staff one last time. "Let this be a reminder," he said, his voice firm but kind. "No rule, no protocol should ever overshadow the respect we owe to those who served. Honor is more important than procedure, and dignity should always come first." Harold stepped outside, breathing in the fresh air. He looked up at the clear blue sky and felt a lightness he had not felt in years. The moment that began with disappointment had turned into a celebration of courage, respect, and humanity. The medal he carried was a symbol, yes, but the true reward was the recognition, the dignity restored, and the knowledge that he had been seen and valued. As he walked slowly toward the street, leaning on his cane, Harold felt the eyes of visitors on him, not with pity but with admiration. Children waved, veterans saluted, and families smiled. For Harold, this was a gift that could never be taken away. It was a moment in time when respect overcame bureaucracy, when compassion triumphed over indifference, and when one person in authority acted decisively to honor what truly mattered. The black SUVs drove away quietly, carrying General Matthews to his next destination, but the impact of his intervention remained. Harold's story would be remembered, shared, and told for years to come. It was a reminder that courage does not only exist on the battlefield, it also exists in standing up for what is right, in ensuring that every individual, especially those who served, is treated with respect and dignity. As Harold made his way home, he clutched the medal and smiled to himself. He knew that today would be a memory to cherish, not only for him but for everyone who witnessed it. It was a day when justice, honor, and recognition won. It was a day when an elderly veteran, once denied entry, became the center of a story that inspired everyone around him. And most importantly, it was a day that proved the power of kindness, courage, and respect.